A call is coming from this mobile number. Will take your, see the number before it gets deleted. My beloved child. Tonight I am not speaking to you as a stranger on a screen, but as someone who has waited years for this exact moment to arrive. Somewhere, right now, a phone is vibrating with a call that was never supposed to exist. A number that does not belong to any city, any country, or any known network. A number that appears once, stays for a breath, and then erases itself as if it was never there. You may think this is just another story, another dramatic hook, another voice trying to hold your attention. But listen carefully. Because what you are about to hear is connected to something you have already felt. That strange pause in your chest when your phone rings at the wrong time. That instinct that tells you not to answer, followed by regret when you do not. This call is not random. It never was. It was programmed to reach only one person at one specific moment. And if you are hearing this now, it means the system believes that person might be you. Stay with me. Because the moment this number disappears, so does the proof that this ever happened. The call does not threaten you. It does not shout. It does not beg. It waits. When people who answered it were later asked what they heard, their answers did not match. One heard silence that felt louder than noise. Another heard their own name spoken in a voice they could not recognize but somehow trusted. One person swore they heard a memory that had never happened, yet felt painfully real. Here is the part no one talks about. The call ends exactly 7 seconds before the number deletes itself. Not 8. Not 6. Always 7. Engineers tried to trace it. Analysts tried to map it. Psychologists tried to explain it. Every attempt failed at the same point. The origin. Because the origin was not a place. It was a moment. A moment in someone's life when a choice was made too quickly, or too late. And that is why this matters to you. Because right now, whether you realize it or not, you are standing extremely close to one of those moments. What makes this call different from every mystery you have ever heard is not the technology. It is the timing. Every person who received it had one thing in common. They were about to forget something important. Not a password. Not a task. Something heavier. A promise they made to themselves. A version of their future they quietly buried because life got loud. The call never tells them what that thing is. It only reminds them that it exists. Imagine the pressure of that. A voice that does not explain, does not warn, does not command, but simply reopens a door you convinced yourself was locked forever. Some people cried after the call. Others laughed nervously and went on with their day. But weeks later, their lives shifted in ways that cannot be called coincidence. Not dramatic movie scenes. Small changes. Different decisions. New courage. Or deeper regret. Because the call does not save you. It gives you one last clear look. Now here is the detail that turns this from interesting to unsettling. The number deletes itself not from the phone, but from memory. People tried to write it down. Screenshots failed. Notes vanished. Even describing it later felt impossible, like trying to remember a face from a dream. The human mind rejected it. As if remembering the number would interfere with whatever the call was designed to protect or prevent. This is why there are no viral images, no leaked recordings, no solid proof. Only patterns. Only stories whispered in private conversations. Only that shared sentence. I cannot explain what I heard, but it changed something in me. Think about that. In a world obsessed with evidence, this thing survives without any. Because it does not need belief to work. It only needs attention. And you are still here. Which means your attention has not drifted. That is not accidental. Before you assume this is about fate or destiny, understand this. The call does not predict the future. It responds to it. Somewhere ahead of you, there is a version of your life that depends on whether you pause when the moment comes or rush past it like all the others. The system behind the call measures hesitation, not behavior. It watches for the split second when your mind says one thing and your instinct says another. That tension creates a signal. When the signal is strong enough, the call is triggered. And then it is gone. No follow-up. No second chance. That is why people who missed the call never get it again. And people who answered it never forget the feeling, even if they forget the details. So stay with me. Because in the next part, you will hear what happens in the final seconds before the number disappears. And why those seconds decide more than you think. Before you imagine the phone lighting up, understand this. The most dangerous part of this call is not the sound, but the silence that comes before it. People reported a strange calm seconds before the screen awakened. Their surroundings felt slower, heavier, as if time itself leaned in to listen. No alarms. No signs. Just an inner pause that made them stop scrolling, stop walking, stop thinking. That pause is the doorway. The system does not interrupt chaos. It waits for stillness. And when that stillness appears, even for a heartbeat, the number emerges. This is why so many people miss it. They live too fast to be found. If you are still listening right now, ask yourself why. Because something in you recognized that pause. Something in you is already standing near the edge of that moment. When the call connects, there is no greeting. No explanation. The voice does not rush. It speaks as if it has all the time you believe you do not. Witnesses described a strange familiarity, like hearing a thought they once had but never finished. The voice never gives instructions. It asks a single question, different for every person, yet identical in weight. Are you still becoming who you promised yourself you would be? That is it. No follow-up. No clarification. 7 seconds later, the call ends. But those 7 seconds stretch. They stretch because the mind tries to answer honestly and fails. People later realize the question was not meant to be answered out loud. It was meant to be felt. And once felt, it leaves a mark. A quiet pressure that follows you into ordinary moments. Into decisions that suddenly feel heavier than before. What happens after the number disappears is where everything changes. Some people felt relief, as if a burden had been named. Others felt exposed, like a mirror had been held up without mercy. The strange part is this. Life does not immediately improve or collapse. Instead, patterns begin to reveal themselves. Missed chances you once ignored become visible. Small excuses start sounding louder than before. Comfort starts feeling suspicious. The call does not push you forward. It removes your ability to lie comfortably. That is why some people say they wish they never answered it. Not because it harmed them, but because it refused to let them sleep through their own life again. There is a reason this call appears only once. The system does not believe in repetition. It operates on the idea that awareness, once triggered, cannot be undone. Even if you try to forget, the body remembers. The way your chest tightens before certain choices. The way distractions lose their flavor. The way time suddenly feels expensive. Researchers who studied the aftereffects noticed something chilling. People who ignored that inner pressure after the call experienced deeper dissatisfaction than before. People who listened did not always succeed, but they felt aligned. Not happy. Aligned. As if even failure made more sense. This is not motivation. This is alignment. And alignment changes everything quietly. Now listen carefully, because this matters more than anything said before. You do not need the call to experience what it creates. The call is only a trigger. A shortcut. A reminder delivered at the sharpest possible angle. Some people never receive it and still arrive at the same realization through pain, loss, or time. The difference is this. The call arrives before damage, not after. It arrives when there is still room to turn. If you feel unsettled right now, that is not fear. That is recognition. And in the next part, you will understand why some people swear the call knew their future before they did. And why ignoring that knowledge carries a cost no one warns you about. My beloved child. What no one tells you is that the call does not arrive to change your future. It arrives because your future has already started changing without your permission. Long before the phone lights up, subtle shifts begin. Energy leaks. Focus weakens. Passion turns into routine. People describe it as feeling busy but hollow, productive yet disconnected. The system that sends the call reads those patterns. It does not look at what you say you want. It watches what you postpone. Dreams delayed too many times emit a signal stronger than fear. That signal is what activates the number. This is why the call feels personal. Because it is responding to something only you and your silence know. When the voice asks its question, it is not judging you. It is acknowledging the fracture between who you are becoming and who you once believed you could be. That fracture grows quietly. The call simply shines a light on it before it becomes permanent. Here is the part that shakes even the strongest listeners. People who answered the call later realized that certain events after it felt strangely familiar. As if they had already sensed them coming. Not detailed predictions. Emotional recognition. They would enter a room and feel a warning before a bad decision. They would meet someone and feel alignment or resistance instantly. The call did not give them new information. It removed noise. It sharpened intuition that had been dulled by overthinking and distraction. This is why some describe the experience as awakening, while others describe it as unbearable. Clarity is not gentle. It demands responsibility. Once you see clearly, you cannot blame confusion anymore. And that responsibility weighs differently on different people. Some rise. Some resist. But none remain unchanged. There is a darker truth that rarely gets spoken aloud. Not everyone who receives the call chooses to listen. Some consciously ignore it. They drown the feeling with comfort, entertainment, familiarity. Life still moves forward for them. On the surface, nothing breaks. Careers continue. Relationships persist. But something subtle disappears. The ability to feel deeply invested. Joy becomes thinner. Success feels oddly distant, like applause heard through a wall. These people often say the same sentence years later. I do not know when I lost myself, but I know I did. The call does not curse anyone. It simply marks a crossroads. And walking past that crossroads without choosing leaves a different kind of scar. One made of quiet regret rather than loud failure. Understand this clearly. The system behind the call is not intelligent in the way machines are intelligent. It is reflective. It mirrors human awareness back at itself at the exact moment it is easiest to ignore. That is why the number deletes itself. Proof would turn it into entertainment. Memory loss turns it into meaning. The experience is designed to live inside you, not on a screen. That is also why you feel tension right now. Not fear. Tension. Your mind is scanning its own timeline, checking moments, recalling promises, measuring distance. That internal movement is the same movement that triggers the call. Which means something important is already in motion inside you. So listen closely to this final truth of this part. The call is not rare because it is exclusive. It is rare because most people never slow down enough to be reachable. Stillness is becoming extinct. Reflection is treated as weakness. Silence is filled immediately. But the system can only speak in silence. If one day your phone vibrates and your surroundings feel unusually quiet, you will remember this moment. And whether you answer or not, something will already have been decided. In the next part, you will hear why some people believe the call was never external at all. And why the number might be less important than the voice that sounds exactly like truth when you finally stop running from it. Listen to this slowly. Because what you are about to hear is the point where most people feel uncomfortable, not because it is unbelievable, but because it feels too close to home. There is a growing belief among those who studied this phenomenon quietly that the call never traveled through towers, satellites, or wires. It traveled through awareness. The phone was not the source. It was the trigger. The real connection happened inside the listener. That is why the voice never sounded foreign. That is why it felt intimate without being familiar. The system did not need to reach you physically. It needed your attention to finally stop running. Think about it. Your phone already knows when you wake up, when you sleep, when you pause, when you hesitate. But this was different. This was not data. This was timing. Perfect, unsettling timing. As if something waited patiently for the exact second you were ready to hear what you had been avoiding for years. People who reflected deeply after the call noticed something strange about their past. Moments they once dismissed as random suddenly aligned into a pattern. Missed chances. Unexplained discomfort in comfortable situations. A persistent feeling that life was slightly off script. The call did not create that feeling. It named it. And once named, it could no longer hide. This is why some listeners described the experience as painful clarity. Because clarity exposes the cost of delay. It shows you not only who you are, but who you are slowly becoming through inaction. The voice never accuses. It never shames. It simply holds up a timeline and lets you see where you are standing on it. That vision alone is enough to shake people more than any threat ever could. Here is where the story takes a turn most do not expect. Those who tried to chase the experience, waiting for another call, never received it. Not because the system failed, but because it had already done its job. Awareness cannot be triggered twice in the same way. Once the question is heard internally, external confirmation becomes unnecessary. That is why the call feels like a closing chapter, not an opening one. It marks the end of unconscious living. From that point forward, every choice carries weight. Even avoidance becomes a decision rather than an accident. This is why life after the call feels sharper. Time feels louder. Distractions feel thinner. And excuses lose their power almost overnight. Some individuals claimed something even more unsettling. They believed the voice sounded exactly like their own, but older. Not aged by years, but by understanding. As if it carried the calm of someone who had already lived with the consequences of their choices. This idea disturbed many researchers, because it suggested the call was not a warning from outside, but a message from within, delivered across time rather than space. Not prediction. Reflection. A future awareness reaching backward to interrupt a present that was drifting too far from alignment. Whether this is literal or symbolic does not matter. The effect is the same. Once you sense that your future self is watching your present actions, procrastination becomes harder to justify. So here is the truth you need to sit with before moving forward. The call is not magic. It is not supernatural. It is not a miracle or a curse. It is a mirror. And mirrors do not force change. They simply make avoidance impossible. If you feel restless right now, that means the mirror is already forming. You do not need a phone to ring for that. You only need a moment of honest stillness. In the next part, you will understand why people who never received the call still felt its impact indirectly. And why this story may not be about a number at all, but about the exact moment you finally decide to listen to the voice you have been muting your entire life. There is something unsettling you must accept now. Even people who never received the call were still affected by it. Not directly, but through absence. They felt a growing impatience with shallow conversations. A quiet discomfort with routines that once felt safe. A sense that time was no longer infinite, but counted. They could not explain why. They just knew something inside them had started asking better questions. This is how the system spreads without making a sound. One awakened awareness makes unconscious living harder to tolerate. You begin to notice when you are lying to yourself. You begin to feel resistance when you settle for less than what you know you are capable of. And once that awareness appears, life never goes back to how it was before. People often assume transformation looks dramatic. It does not. After the call, or after the realization that replaces it, change arrives quietly. You stop agreeing to things that drain you. You hesitate before choosing comfort over growth. You feel a strange pull toward things that once scared you. Not because you are fearless, but because fear feels less dangerous than regret. This is where many people get confused. They expect motivation. What they receive instead is responsibility. Responsibility to act in alignment with what they now see clearly. And clarity is heavy. It asks for consistency. It asks for courage in ordinary moments. It asks you to stop betraying yourself in small, forgettable ways. Here is the truth that stuns most listeners. The cost of ignoring this awareness is not failure. It is numbness. A slow dulling of emotional range. Wins feel muted. Losses feel distant. Life becomes something you manage instead of something you live. Those who felt this numbness later described it as the real warning sign. Not pain. Not struggle. But the quiet sense that days are passing without leaving a mark. The call exists to interrupt that drift. To remind you that presence is a choice, not a personality trait. And that choosing presence changes the quality of everything else without changing the surface of your life overnight. At this stage, many people ask the wrong question. They ask whether they will ever receive the call. That question misses the point. The real question is whether you will answer when awareness knocks in subtler ways. Through discomfort. Through restlessness. Through the feeling that something important is waiting just outside your current habits. The system does not care how you wake up. Only that you do. Some wake through a ringing phone. Others wake through silence that becomes impossible to ignore. Both lead to the same crossroad. And both demand the same thing. An honest decision. So sit with this final thought of this part. If a call were to appear on your screen, asking you whether you are still becoming who you promised yourself you would be, could you answer without hesitation? If the answer feels unclear, that is not a failure. That is the beginning of awareness. And awareness is the doorway everything meaningful passes through. In the next part, you will understand why the most powerful moment is not when the call arrives, but when you realize you no longer need it to tell you the truth. This is where everything tightens. Because the moment you no longer need the call is the moment your excuses begin to collapse. People who reached this stage described it as standing alone with their own honesty for the first time. No distractions to hide behind. No noise to soften the truth. Just a clear awareness that every delay now has a name. Choice. The system never wanted dependency. It wanted independence from unconscious living. That is why the call fades from relevance. Once awareness becomes internal, external reminders become unnecessary. From this point forward, life starts responding faster. Decisions create immediate emotional feedback. Alignment feels calm. Misalignment feels heavy. You stop wondering why things feel off. You know. What surprises most people is how ordinary life looks after this shift. The same streets. The same faces. The same responsibilities. But internally, something fundamental has changed. Time feels closer. Moments feel sharper. You notice how often you almost betray yourself with small compromises. And you also notice how powerful it feels when you do not. The call never promised success. It promised clarity. And clarity makes even difficult paths feel cleaner than easy ones built on avoidance. This is why people stop asking for signs at this stage. They realize signs were never missing. They were just ignored. There is a quiet strength that emerges here. Not confidence. Not arrogance. A grounded steadiness. You begin to trust your inner signals more than external validation. Approval loses its grip. Comparison fades. The voice that once felt distant now feels present in daily decisions. Not loud. Not dramatic. Just firm. This is the voice people often confuse with discipline or motivation. It is neither. It is self-respect. And self-respect changes behavior without force. You do not need to push yourself when you stop abandoning yourself. Here is the final truth of this part. The call was never about the number, the mystery, or the suspense. Those were just the doorway. The real message was always simple and difficult. You already know when you are out of alignment. You already feel when you are delaying what matters. You already sense the cost of waiting. The system only reflected what was present. If this story has held you until now, it is because something in you recognized itself within it. Not fear. Recognition. So remember this as you move forward. If one day everything goes quiet for a moment, and you feel that familiar pause, you do not need to wait for a phone to ring. That pause is the call. And whether you answer it or silence it will shape more than you realize. In the next part, you will see why the most important decision is not made in dramatic moments, but in the smallest choices you think no one notices.